Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this NFU fly-in webinar to be sure and give you guys a little bit of background information about the upcoming event, just a matter of days in DC, and to share some strategies on how to make the most successful fly-in possible. Hopefully, whether you are new to a fly-in or you are seasoned, I think there'll be some good tips that we can always pick up. We'll also share a little bit about the dynamics around the issues that, as Farmers Union, we're going to be fighting for. Certainly, Farm Bill will be one of those issues. And we know that the current Farm Bill expires in September 30th. And so part of the importance of having Farmers Union members come to Washington, D.C. is to make sure that legislators understand not only why a Farm Bill is important, but why we can't miss this opportunity to get a Farm Bill done yet this year because of dropping prices and the lack of a proper safety net for commodity growers, the lost opportunity for things like mandatory country of origin labeling and other fairness for farmers issues, the lack of an opportunity or a failed opportunity to do more on conservation and climate smart efforts. So for a number of reasons, Farmers Union members from across the country, you guys will be coming to share the reason why all of these issues demand that we get a Farm Bill done yet this year. And we have a team here to kind of walk through each of those individual issues. Again, some of the strategies necessary to make that happen. And it's worth just repeating for everybody that here at National Farmers Union, we have an incredible team of staff that work with Capitol Hill members and staff on a regular basis. But there is really absolutely no replacement for the authentic, real voice that comes from farmers and ranchers themselves. And so it is really with a lot of gratitude and appreciation for the time, the willingness, and the dedication to the organization to come to DC and share those stories. I share with each of you thanks for that. Hopefully, if you have questions, there'll be an opportunity to share those and hopefully get some responses. But our team also stands by between now and fly-in if questions come up along the way. And once again, thanks for joining us today. Hope you can learn a few things, get some answers to your questions. And at this time, I will turn it over to our VP of Advocacy, Mike Strands.
Thanks, Rob. And thanks, everybody, for being part of today's orientation webinar. I know you're excited to be here, to be part of the fly-in just a little more than a week, but we as staff are very excited about it too, because this is one of the highlights of the year for us. We get to see you, we get to spend some time on Capitol Hill with you. And I know I always come away from the fly-in maybe a little tired, but ultimately more energized and enthusiastic about how we can make a difference every day here in Washington and in our communities around the country. So in the rest of the hour here, we're going to spend some time on a few items of business. One of those things is I'll run through the agenda for what you'll be doing when you're in town in Washington here, September 9th, 10th, and 11th. We'll, of course, dive into the priorities that we've identified as what we'll be talking about on Capitol Hill and with administration officials. So we'll kind of get into the weeds a little bit on some of those topics. And then we'll also show you and talk about and share ideas about how to be the best advocates that you can be when you're in those meetings. But first, a couple of questions for you. I think many of you probably can use your mouse or tap on the screen here for a couple of questions. So the first poll question, just to see where we're all at, is have you ever been part of an effort to meet with an elected official at the local, state, or federal level? So have you ever met with an elected official, be it in a proper business meeting or interacted with them, tried to get a point across to them? Is that a yes or no? Give you a couple moments here to let us know if you've done that before. Let's see what we've got. I bet we have some experience, but I bet we've got some new people too. Let's take a look at the results here. Yes. Okay, lock those in. And looking for the results here. I'm sure they're coming in. All right, 88% of you have met with an elected official before. That's good. So I bet some of that has happened during an NFU fly-in. So I'm curious, how many fly-ins have you been part of before? NFU fly-ins. You'll have some questions here or possible answers to respond with there. How many have you been to? It'll be good to see what the distribution is for experience and veterans out there when it comes to NFU fly-ins. Take a moment. You might have to use more than two hands. I see some names out there of some expert fly-in participants who probably might need to use their fingers and toes to count them all up. Let's see. How many fly-ins have you been to? Oh, awesome. So almost half of you haven't been to one before. That's great. And we've got 5 individuals who have been to more than 10. That's great as well. So, and a good mix of experience there. Of course, we'll try to educate you through this call today, but some of the best learning you'll do is from other members. And fortunately, you'll have some opportunities to get to meet them along the way. So we'll talk about that. Some of you have been identified as and are participating in the NFU Emerging Leaders Program. So there's been some programming that the NFU staff has put together for that, happening before convention, or excuse me, before the fly-in. And you would have received a link to register for that. I bet somebody has a link to register for that. We'll drop that in the chat here as we go along here. But if you haven't already registered for the Emerging Leaders event, please do so. And that will be happening on Sunday, September 8th, here in the NFU office at 20 F Street Northwest. We'll have a few events there, so you'll get to know it well. But that happy hour is a good chance to meet other members from around the country, have some snacks and refreshments the night before things really get underway for the fly-in. Again, we'll share the link to register for that. The main events begin Monday morning. We'll be meeting at USDA to spend a few hours with officials from across the Department of Agriculture. One of the important things is to make sure you arrive good and early. Security can take a while at USDA, and we've got special access through door 5 of the South building of the USDA. Please get there, start getting there around 7 a.m. The show really starts at 8, but if you can get there at 7, 7:15, 7:30, that goes a long way to making this a smooth process. So make sure you get there good and early, starting at 7 on Monday morning. If it's raining, you might want to bring an umbrella or be prepared because it'll be tricky to not get rained on there. So keep that in mind. Security will ask a few questions if you got an umbrella, but I think that works out. Once we're in at USDA, you'll be hearing from a whole host of officials. Of course, we'll do some briefings from NFU staff and leadership in the beginning to kind of go over the plan for what we'll be talking about on the Hill. But then we're set to hear from Secretary Vilsack from 9 a.m. to about 10. He's spoken at many fly-ins and conventions before and often leaves us with a really strong message of how to be good advocates for rural America. So we'll hear from him. We'll hear from a couple of undersecretaries as well, Jenny Lester Moffitt from Marketing and Regulatory Programs, and from Robert Bonney from the Food Production and Conservation Mission Area. We'll also hear from Farm Service Agency Administrator Zach Ducheneau. Many of you have met him before. He's a longtime friend and ally of Farmers Union from South Dakota. We'll also be moving ahead with some agreements to work with the Farm Service Agency to help address staffing issues. And then we'll also wrap things up at USDA with remarks from the Deputy Secretary, Xochitl Torres Small. She's from New Mexico, a former member of Congress, and has a lot of inspiring perspectives and is doing a lot of work with new, beginning, and emerging farmers. So we've got a whole host of activities at USDA on Monday morning. After a quick lunch break, either at USDA or someplace between USDA and Capitol Hill, we'll reconvene in the Russell building of the Senate offices in the Kennedy Caucus Room. Some of you may have taken part in this event last year where we had about 150 spots. available. This year, we have enough room for everybody. So come on up to the Russell Building. It's in this big fancy meeting room that has a lot of history in it. And we'll be hearing some interesting perspectives from some key leaders from the Department of Justice, where we'll hear from Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, Jonathan Cantor. We'll hear from the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Regan, and we'll also hear from the Chair of the Federal Trade Commission, Lena Khan. Some representatives from the Senate Agriculture Committee are also set to join us there. So we'll get things started on Monday at the Russell Building at 1:15 p.m. and things should run till about 3:30 or 4 that afternoon. After that, we'll come on back to the NFU offices, just a few blocks, 2-3 blocks from the Russell Building, where we'll be having our fly-in reception. Brought to us with support from several cooperative partners we have in Washington. It's a chance to have some refreshments and a good time with everybody from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Hopefully on our roof if the weather's nice. Today, the weather's pushing 100 degrees here in DC. I hope it's a little cooler then. But if the weather doesn't cooperate, we'll be meeting in our lobby instead, which also can accommodate a gregarious bunch like us. Tuesday and Wednesday are the main events where we'll be having congressional meetings across Capitol Hill. We'll talk more about the schedule for those and how to navigate the Hill, but the bulk of those meetings happen Tuesday and on Wednesday. And then as we go along, we'll also be having some meetings with different federal agencies, and these will be smaller, more targeted meetings. You'll find out about these from your group leaders or from your state leaders. Some of these different agencies have some key initiatives that we've been working with them on. It's a way for us to make sure Farmers Union's voice is heard all across Washington and to bring up some very particular issues we might be encountering in our states and communities. So stay tuned for those. And then on Wednesday morning, we'll be having a briefing at the White House. Actually, the briefing will be just across the yard in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, but it's all part of the White House complex. That meeting will be going on from 10 to 11:30 on Wednesday morning, and we'll have to start meeting for security purposes at about 9:15 a.m. at the corner of 17th Street Northwest and State Place Northwest. If you've been part of a fly-in the last couple of years, it's the same spot we've been going to, and we'll get you in that way. There's a possibility for some tours after that. If your flights leave town, leave DC late in the afternoon on Wednesday, you might be able to take part in a White House tour. Still getting some further details about that. That would start at noon and last about 45 minutes or an hour. We'll share more information about that as it comes along, but it's a cool opportunity we might be able to make use of. So that's the agenda. Let's talk about the priorities. As President LaRue said at the top, it's very much Farm Bill season in Washington. There's just over a month until this current Farm Bill expires. The effects of that wouldn't really be felt for another couple of months after that. But we've got some work to do if Congress is going to get that done yet this year. Odds are against it actually finishing up this year, but we want to be prepared in the event that it does move forward. And that's why we're highlighting some Farm Bill priorities. Along with that, we're talking about competition, and that's through our Fairness for Farmers campaign. We're also making sure that renewable energy and issues like that, whether it's biofuels, renewable energy on the farm, those issues are brought forward. And we also want to address a few concerns we have with the laws and regulations surrounding the agricultural workforce. So my colleagues and I will talk through those here in the next few minutes. We'll have time for questions at the end of that this issue priority update. Look forward to getting those. And then we'll, of course, talk more about how to be a good advocate at the end. So talking a bit about all these issues, keep in mind that you'll be provided with a bunch of issue background information. You'll be receiving a whole bunch of these cheat sheets, as we call them, or the leave behinds. They look something like this, last year's. These make for great notes for you to remember what to bring up during a meeting. They also are great for leaving behind with a member of Congress or their staff. They're also custom made so that they fit in the pockets, maybe in your jacket or in a bag, you know, that sort of thing. So make use of these. These have pretty much all the answers on it. Even if they're short and brief, They're good checklists for you to remember what to talk about. There's also a QR code on them to direct those staffers or lawmakers to the FlyIn webpage, nfu.org/FlyIn, where we'll be keeping a bunch of that information as well. So hang on to these. You'll get a bunch of them. Be sure to leave them around the hill. You'll also be receiving a background document, we call it the booklet, that provides a lot of deeper dives into each of the issues and some of the status and situations surrounding each of them. So those are designed for you to keep with you, not to leave behind, but they're pretty heavy stuff, and they provide some good background for you as you have the meetings. So talking about the Farm Bill, we've got 3 major priorities within the Farm Bill, and a whole host of other things we want to raise too. And we talk about many of them during the fly-in. One, we want to make sure there's a competition title in the Farm Bill. That's a way for us to push forward on a bunch of our Fairness for Farmers asks. We want to make sure that there's a more transparent and fair marketplace for family farmers and ranchers. That's why we want to see a special investigator office established at USDA that's dedicated to making sure that fairness rules are being followed, whether that's the Packers and Stockyards Act, whether it's on seeds, whether it's on procurement, whatever it might be. We want a special investigator at USDA to look into those dealings. We want to make sure there's transparency in the market. We've pushed forward on the Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act over the last several years. That's another issue that could be addressed and should be addressed through the Farm Bill. We want to make sure that there's a lot of investment in local and regional food systems. During the pandemic, we saw how fragile our food system can be if we quite literally put all of our eggs in one basket. We want to make sure that there's many different avenues for farmers to sell their products or to buy their inputs. So we want to see those sorts of efforts to build more competitive markets in the Farm Bill. We also want to make sure that there's a strong farm safety net. There's been talk in the Farm Bill, especially on the House side, where the House of Representatives has already passed a Farm Bill through their Agriculture Committee. But on the Senate side, there's 2 different competing frameworks out there right now, where it has not yet gone through the Senate Agriculture Committee. But the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats have different ideas about where that should go. One thing we see in all those proposals, though, the House bill or the Senate frameworks, is that they all want to increase and strengthen the farm safety net somehow or another. This could be through increased reference prices, where some of the triggers and mechanisms within the price loss coverage program and the agriculture risk coverage program would be increased to better reflect the cost of production and market realities we see nowadays. We also want to see maybe some flexibility in base acres and how programs are covering and providing assistance to farmers. We want to see more farmers able to be covered with more acres being able to be in the programs. We also want to boost crop insurance. Crop insurance is, as many of us know, is a strong part of the farm safety net. We want to make it stronger, whether that's through opening the doors of crop insurance to more types of production, more farmers, more mechanisms that protect against risk, or if it's to help farmers get involved in it, whether it's through the Crop Insurance for Future Farmers Act, whether it's the Whole Farm Revenue Protection Improvement Act. There's a lot of ways to bring more people and more protection into the farm safety net through crop insurance. And we also want to make sure disaster programs work as they ought to. In the last several years, we've seen ad hoc disaster programs get propped up either by the result of trade wars against our trading partners due to tariffs, or through disruptions in the marketing system as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, or from market collapse or weather disasters. USDA stood up a program called the Emergency Relief Program over the last couple of years. There were some hiccups with how that worked, but it did set up a standing set of disaster program principles. Some issues and some efforts to do that through the Farm Bill could build a stronger and more reactive and more effective standing disaster program. So we'd like to see that. And then also the other Farm Bill priority is on addressing climate change and improving soil health. There's so many Farm Bill programs out there that tackle conservation issues, and we want to make sure they're also tackling climate issues. The Inflation Reduction Act, the landmark legislation passed about 2 years ago, put a lot of additional resources and funding into climate change. We want to make sure that those dollars are used wisely through the Farm Bill for climate and conservation or conservation purposes. And whether that's through EQIP, CSP, or other programs, we want to ensure that those continue to thrive. There's also a couple other Farm Bill priorities we want to hit on as well. Whenever we're talking about farm bills, this is about food policy, and food policy is about feeding people. So if Congress, as would be proposed by the House Farm Bill and a few others out there, they would cut nutrition programs. That's the wrong direction. That's the wrong start. We need to be talking about how to provide a good, strong food system. Cutting nutrition programs is not the way to do that. So we want to make sure that nutrition title remains a strong part of the Farm Bill. And to do otherwise would be to break apart the Farm Bill coalition. We need to make sure that there's adequate resources available and more resources available for farm stress and mental health programs. We've seen a lot of progress on this over the last several years. Now is the time to keep building on that. And as was noted a little bit previously, programs need to be open to as many participants as they can be that are farmers and ranchers, family farmers and ranchers. And one of those ways is to really emphasize beginning, veteran, and socially disadvantaged farmers within the programs that are already there, and to make sure there's efforts to bring them into the Farm Bill community. So by building a stronger community, by building a bigger Farm Bill coalition, we'll have a better chance at getting this done before the end of this Congress, before the end of the year. And even if there are some long odds to getting a Farm Bill done in 2024, we want to make sure farmers unions' priorities are part of that discussion, and that we keep pushing forward for a good Farm Bill this year. So with that, we'll move on to another section here, and that's on fairness for farmers issues even beyond the Farm Bill. So for that, I turn it over to NFU Government Relations Director, Aaron Shire. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for the introduction, and good to be with everybody today, and really looking forward to seeing you all here in Washington, D.C. So Mike already talked about the competition and fairness for farmers opportunities in the Farm Bill. Those are really important. Mike also, of course, talked about the risk that we might not get a Farm Bill done yet this year. But there are other things that we can also be doing to address our competition concerns, to increase opportunities in the marketplace, and to advance our fairness for farmers priorities. And I'd like to talk about a few of those where there's opportunities to have conversations with your lawmakers on Capitol Hill. First is around the Packers and Stockyards Act rulemakings. Of course, the Packers and Stockyards Act, that very important law originally from 1921, that provides protections for family livestock producers. And USDA has been undertaking rulemakings to update the Packers and Stockyards Act, and to ensure that there are stronger opportunities for enforcement. The law just hasn't kept up with the highly consolidated livestock markets that we have today. Several rules have already been finalized. This is excellent. There are two rules that have yet to be finalized and that have been proposed, one with a comment period actually that is open right now. And actually, Mike, if you can skip to the next slide real quick, I want to make sure our participants are aware of the action alert that we have open right now on one of those rules, and that's the so-called unfair practices or competitive injury rule. This is a really important one for Farmers Union. It has to do with this longstanding issue of sort of jumbled court cases that have led to difficulty enforcing the law. We've had great activity so far with this action alert. This allows you to sign a petition in support of the unfair practices rule, and then go ahead and submit a comment to the Federal Register. The proposed rule and the comment period closes on September 11th, actually during FlyIn. So look out for opportunities as well during our FlyIn to participate in this action. But back to the list of our priorities. Because of important rules like this, we want to get these rulemakings done. We want to let USDA have that chance to get these rules done, and for farmers union members and others to go through the public, transparent notice and comment period. But unfortunately, through the annual appropriations process in Congress, the House has passed an agriculture appropriations bill that would stop these rulemakings, that would roll back the ones that got done so far, that would prevent any further work on them. Thankfully, the Senate passed their agricultural appropriations bill with a different approach. It allows the rules to go forward. It also increases funding for Packers and Stockyards Act enforcement at USDA. So when you're here in DC, tell lawmakers to support the Senate version for the fiscal year 2025 agriculture appropriations bill, so that when Congress goes to conference those bills, they make the right choice. And that's to support family livestock producers in the Senate version of that bill. Similarly, there's another opportunity through the annual appropriations process, and that's around this issue of funding for the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. This is also a really important part of the picture of achieving our Fairness for Farmers priorities. The Antitrust Division has really ramped up their enforcement of our antitrust laws over the past several years, in part pressed on by us here at Farmers Union. And unfortunately, much like in the House Agriculture appropriations bill that I mentioned, in the House Appropriations Commerce Justice Science appropriations bill, there is an effort to roll back DOJ antitrust funding. There's also the additional issue that in the last fiscal year, 2024 appropriations process, really important bill called the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act, provision in it was rolled back, and we need to restore that provision. And what this provision does is allow, when there are more large mergers being proposed, it allows the fees that are required when those mergers are filed for to go and flow directly to the Antitrust Division so that they can ramp up their staffing. Staffing at the Antitrust Division has been stagnant for decades, and without adequate staffing, it's really hard to investigate and review these large mergers. So the House Commerce Justice Science bill doesn't increase that DOJ antitrust funding, and it doesn't restore the provision in the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act, a bipartisan bill and popular bill that passed several years ago and with NFU's support. But the Senate Commerce Justice Science bill, it greatly increases DOJ antitrust funding, and it restores the provision. So once again, ask lawmakers when you're here in DC to support the Senate version of the Commerce Justice Science fiscal year 2025 appropriations bill. A mouthful, I know, but that's why we'll have details in the booklet for you. And then finally, it's important that that we continue to make progress on the issue of right to repair, that all farmers across the country can access the repair opportunities on their tractors, and that equipment manufacturers aren't able to restrict access to repair. Already made great progress on this issue. For example, at the state level in Colorado, about a year ago or so, they passed the first agricultural right to repair law. But of course, that only provides a right to repair for ag equipment in Colorado, and we need right to repair all across the country. So there are several bills in Congress that have been introduced that would guarantee farmers the right to repair. We should support those bills. With that, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Ann Steckel, to talk about renewable fuels.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Aaron, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to spend a few minutes talking to everybody about biofuels. As we know, biofuels has really been a priority issue for the National Farmers Union. And we really remain very supportive of removing the barriers to higher level blends of ethanol and promoting advanced biofuels. So as you go to Capitol Hill, a couple of issues that I wanted to flag for everyone to keep in mind. There are some pieces of legislation that I would encourage you to talk to your members of Congress about supporting. To start off, let's start off with higher level blends of ethanol. One pathway to achieve these higher level blends of ethanol is through a piece of legislation called the Next Generation Fuels Act, and that's S944 and HR 2434, companion legislation. And what this does is it really helps our country transition the liquid fuel supply system and transition new vehicles to advanced engines that take advantage of this higher level blend of octane fuels. So the transition would increase the amount of ethanol in the fuel supply while lowering prices at the pump for farmers and consumers. So certainly a win-win for all. As we know, ethanol's high octane rating really allows the higher level ethanol blends to result in additional fuel efficiency and significant greenhouse gas reductions. Um, Again, as we know, ethanol is priced lower than gasoline at the pump. So really allowing us to use more ethanol while lowering the price at the pump and getting a higher octane source is really what this legislation will allow us to do. The Next Generation Fuels Act would establish a minimum research octane number, or they call it a RON number, a fuel standard of 98 for gasoline, which is higher than our typical octane number that we currently have at 91. It also requires the added octane value to reduce carbon emissions by at least 40% compared to regular gasoline. And this legislation is very important because it does move us towards our ultimate goal of using higher level blends of ethanol like E30. So in addition to the higher level blends of ethanol, Next Gen Fuels Act, we are supportive of legislation that will allow for year-round usage of E15. A bill has been introduced in the House by Representative Budinsky and Nunn. And this bill really expedites the implementation of EPA's rule to allow year-round E15 sales. So earlier this year, EPA issued a rule to approve a permanent year-round sale of E15, but unfortunately that was only in 8 states. And the approval doesn't take effect until April of 2025. So while we are supportive of the rule, we are also supportive of this legislation because we feel like it's a step in the right direction to allow year-round sales of E15 in all states, not just the 8 states that EPA previously approved. Of course, our ultimate goal does remain moving towards higher level blends of E30, but this E15 does give us another step on our way to E30. So we are supportive of that legislation as well. And then another issue wanted to take a second to talk about that you've all probably heard a lot about, certainly receiving a lot of press, involves sustainable aviation fuel. Ultimately, we think we can use the largest amount of renewable fuels through on-ground transportation, but we're certainly supportive of aviation fuel and aviation fuel being made from sustainable aviation fuel from crop-based residues. So the sustainable aviation fuel and clean fuel production tax credits really have the potential to benefit farmers while lowering carbon emissions. But unfortunately, the way that the rules are being designed with the tax credit could really impede our ability as farmers to participate in this process. So right now, there's a tax credit that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's called the Clean Fuel Production Tax Credit, or 45Z. And that tax credit really has the potential to use for us to use a lot more sustainable aviation fuel if it's implemented correctly. However, the biggest problem we have right now is there are no requirements that feedstocks be grown domestically. Really, this allows foreign producers to capture the 45Z credit, failing to support our U.S. farmers and rural communities. So we're working very closely as this tax credit is implemented to ensure that it really only benefits domestic production. Additionally, the bundling of climate smart agricultural practices and a lot of onerous reporting requirements in the sustainable aviation fuel guidance does unfortunately exclude a large amount of farmers from benefiting from the SAF credit. Farmers have been asked to demonstrate that they use no-till, cover crops, enhanced efficiency fertilizers to produce the feedstocks. And, frankly, this just really isn't possible in all parts of the country, and really would preclude a large amount of our farmers from participating in the sustainable aviation fuel space. So we're working very diligent with Treasury as they implement the 45Z tax credit to ensure that the onerous reporting requirements are going to be reduced, that you don't have to bundle all of these climate smart agricultural practices, and that we have some sort of requirement for domestic only production of feedstocks. So lots going on certainly in that space as well. I wanted to make you all aware of that. At this point, I will now turn it over to Layla Soberanis, who is NFU's Senior Government Relations Representative. Layla?
And hello, everyone. We are very excited to see you here in Washington, D.C., and very much looking forward to answering questions as well. I will be talking about the agricultural workforce and our priorities there for FlyIn. So starting off with the H-2A program, I saw that a few of you have been to Washington, D.C., so you may know what this program is. But for those of you that don't, the H-2A program is a temporary agricultural visa program. It is aimed to help farmers fill employment gaps for hiring workers from different countries. Agriculture employers, farmers who anticipate a shortage in domestic workers are able to apply for the program, and then they're able to bring in non-immigrant foreign workers to perform temporary or seasonal agricultural work. So very much a highly involved program here for our folks. Since its inception, the program has long helped farmers stay in business. They can secure a workforce and able to continue on the farm. However, as recently, there has been a rise in program wage rates, and it has making hiring quite unaffordable and quite difficult. So this FlyIn, we are supporting the temporary freeze of the program's adverse effect wage rate. You'll hear this word a lot, acronym AEWR, the AWR, while pursuing also, we very much are supportive of broader H-2A and agricultural workforce reforms. Now, very briefly, the AWR, it's the required minimum hourly wage rate that must be offered and paid by employers of the H-2A program to the H-2A workers. So over the past 2 decades, the average AWR has more than doubled. And although farmers understand the need to increase wages to meet costs of living, unpredictability and uncertainty is how the AWR is calculated, and it has put a lot of further strain on farmers who depend on this program. So as we walk through the hills of Capitol Hill, when you talk about agricultural workforce issues, we very much are supportive of this program, but also freezing the AWR. To allow for more predictability and certainty for farmers that use this program. Overall, ag labor reform, National Farmers Union is very much supportive of changing not only many things that are problematic within the H-2A program, but also very much supportive of attempts to reform the program and overall comprehensive immigration reform. Most recently, in March of 2021, National Farmers Union supported the House of Representatives passed bill, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. Another acronym that you might hear will be FWMA, this Farm Workforce Modernization Act. However, no need to really learn that one. This bill was included, it did have a variety of H-2A reforms, including the adjustment to the AWR calculation. So don't be surprised if you do hear efforts to bring this bill back, which may or may not happen within the year. So from here, I think we'll move on to the next slide to see if we have any questions. As you can see on the slide, you'll see the link to our webpage, the nfu.org/flyin. If you click on that, on our webpage, you'll have the tentative agenda. Mike mentioned earlier on the webinar that the cheat sheet, and that cheat sheet will have not only very quick draft priorities, all the priorities that we all just mentioned, and it will have a QR code as well. You'll also find links to NFU's Facebook, Twitter, X, and Instagram. see here. Questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Layla. Yeah. So that's a rundown of the priorities for this fly-in. Of course, that's a lot of things to talk about when you have a Capitol Hill meeting. So if you can hit some of them, that goes a long ways. Try to hit them all if you can. But we're also here right now to answer any questions you might have about those. So to ask a question, use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen there. I know there was a question right away that came for wondering about where to get the agenda and things like that. So as Layla said, website on screen right now or down in the chat as well can provide some of that. But I see we've got some questions coming in. Another important question: will a recording of this webinar be available? Yes, this is being recorded and we're going to have it on that same webpage. So when you go to the FlyIn webpage, you'll find a link, hopefully later today, to go to the YouTube site with our beautiful pictures on there and our this video. So good question. Any other questions? Give you a moment here to do that. I do know that I want to highlight that we'll be talking about these issues again Monday morning of the fly-in at USDA, where we'll go through a lot of these very same topics and give you some more background. You'll also be able to ask some questions when you're at USDA of Secretary Vilsack, Undersecretary Moffett, Undersecretary Bonnie, and the rest of the crew there. They'll be open to questions, and I think they always enjoy the opportunity to interact with members of Farmers Union like that. But not seeing any other questions right now. If you have some, don't hesitate to send us an email. And got a few more coming in now, but feel free to send us an email with questions. You probably received some messages from the NFU staff here in the last couple of days, or ask your state staff about that. Let's see. So on the question about dress code, things like that. Yes, this is a business style meeting. So dress for business and along those lines, a jacket, tie, those sorts of things for gentlemen, and be ready for traveling around Capitol Hill quite a bit. Wear some comfortable shoes. We'll talk a bit more about that. Got a question from California Farmers Union here about dairy growth management. Yes, that is part of the materials here and is mentioned in the cheat sheet. I neglected to mention it here in my haste, but it is definitely part of the discussion. There's a lot of dairy issues right now surrounding the Farm Bill and the Federal Milk Marketing Order reform process. We've got some strong positions on that, including returning to the higher of for Class 1 milk pricing, and to make sure that we have a dairy stabilization program in place to build some inroads with members of Congress so that they know when they've got a chance to make those changes that they'll be ready to do so. And a question about talking about different issues besides those included in the fly-in materials. One of the strengths about Farmers Union is that we work together on common issues, and we try to find spots where we can all agree. And even beyond that, we realize that because we're stronger together, that we raise up issues from, I'm from Wisconsin, but I often will talk about issues that are important to people in California or Massachusetts or Illinois. So we talk about the issues that are identified as being important to us all. So yes, you've got wherewithal to talk about the topics that are important to you, but please be mindful of the fact that we're working together as members of a national organization to try to help out, even if it's beyond the issues on our home 40, so to speak. And yes, there will be we've been working on finding some robot guides for taking us around Capitol Hill, but the question that just came in is that we'll have human guides to navigate us to meetings. So yes, you'll have some team leaders from your states identified to help you get from office to office. I want to think about AI possibilities there, but no, I kid. You'll have a good team leader, probably somebody who's been to a fly-in or two to help you get from each topic. And on the question that just came in on healthcare, again, we certainly have a lot of issues to get through and talk about on fly-in priorities. as it stands, we don't have any healthcare topics identified for this year, but I know that there's some stories we can all share and highlight when in congressional meetings. So thanks for the questions. If you've got more, please don't hesitate to drop them in the Q&A function here, send an email, but we'll keep going with some more points. So Layla, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Moving forward, part of the advocacy, we will briefly go through right now 3 stages for how to prepare for before, during, and after the meeting. So I will go ahead and start with before the meeting. So from the poll in the beginning of the webinar, I saw that a big chunk of you all have been to Capitol Hill. Now, if you had been right after the COVID-19 pandemic, you'll know that there was a very heightened security to get in. Now, if you were here before, I think before the pandemic, you'll know that we've now gone back to standard practice. So either way, you'll be going through security. So be aware of that. Pack accordingly, like Mike mentioned, comfortable shoes. If you're a fan of heels, my personal opinion and recommendation would be to make sure you bring 2 pairs of shoes. Put your heels in a bag, or make sure you have comfortable shoes. It can be quite a walk from the House to the Senate. And then, as I mentioned, you'll go through security, but know that you'll be very well seasoned for that. So review your schedule before your meeting as well. Get to know your group. Who's in your group? Who will you be attending every meeting with? And know your strengths. Are you an urban farmer? Are you a rancher? Get to know who you're meeting with and what type of a member of Congress they are, what committees they are in, for example. But then also, more importantly, too, exchange contact information with your group. I think that is something that very much resonates with Farmers Union. We are a big family, and I love hearing the stories of how people have made lifelong friends from bonding over having to get in touch with each other on Capitol Hill. So with that, be flexible and open to opportunities. And I think my colleague Aaron Shire, I will turn it over to him, and he will be able to talk to you about how to prepare for during the meeting. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks so much, Layla. And before I jump into during the meeting, I just wanted to flag, because there was that great question about healthcare. And while, big picture healthcare reform, that kind of stuff, we don't have a priority, but we do on issues related to mental and behavioral health or farm stress issues. And we have a policy priority around the Farmers First Act and support for the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, which NFU has been instrumental in establishing and getting off the ground. So we have that in our policy priorities. So there is one core healthcare related issue in there. I'm not sure if that was precisely what the question was going for, but I just wanted to flag that before I jumped into during the meeting. So a little off track, but I'll jump back in, and thanks, Layla, for sort of running down how to prepare for the meeting and what to do before a meeting. So, all right, you're now sitting down in that meeting with that staffer or that member of Congress. What are some of the things you should be thinking about? First of all, have fun. It's just a conversation. Keep that in mind. And for those of you here who are veterans, you know that well. But if you're new to this and it feels a little bit stressful, don't stress out. This is a fun conversation, and you should enjoy it. Be brief and be polite. And the reason I say that in terms of be brief is you don't have a whole lot of time for these meetings. They're usually no longer than a half hour. Sometimes they're even shorter. It's not you. It's just they're busy. They have a packed schedule up there. And so that's part of being polite too. Know sort of how long your meeting is scheduled for, and you're getting 5 minutes close to the end. Make sure you're also paying attention to the clock and not keeping on going and running the staffer past that time. Of course, they might jump in and say they got to run, but it's also nice if you're watching the clock too and respecting their time during their busy day. And discuss but don't argue. What that is about is that you may feel passionately about the issue you're talking about. In fact, I hope that you do. But just as much as the conversations are about policy issues and the issues that Farmers Union cares about, it's also about building the Farmers Union brand, building rapport with that office, thinking about it as a long-term opportunity. It's just one meeting. You're probably not going to have any time for a lengthy debate. So focus much more on the relationship and hitting those key points, but it's not worth having a fight over the issue. You should, though, be prepared to back up the points that you want to make. That's what providing background info is about. Whether that's having studied up on the policy priorities booklet that we're going to provide you that outlines the different issues and the bills to the best of your ability, or being ready with a story about your farm ranch community that speaks to the issue. Background and facts, figures can be helpful in driving your point home, so be ready with that. And finally, don't be scared to ask for a commitment, to ask the office to support the bill or the topic or the issue that you're talking about. Don't expect you'll get one, but don't hesitate to ask. And that data point of whether you did get a yes or you did get a no or you got something non-committal is important. Take note of that. Bring that back and make sure to share that with national staff, with your state staff and your state leaders. We want to know where folks stand on things, and that's also part of the reason for these conversations. And I'll close again just to remind everybody, have fun, enjoy these conversations, enjoy the opportunity to build these relationships and build the Farmers Union brand. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Charlie Decker, Advocacy Coordinator here at National Farmers Union, to talk about what goes on after a meeting.
Thanks, Aaron. So yeah, moving on to after the meeting. So here's just a couple things we encourage you to do once your Hill meetings have wrapped up. One is to consider sending a thank you note. Sending a follow-up thank you note can be a great way to thank the staffer for taking the time to meet. Can also help you stay in touch down the road and even serve as a resource for them in the future, helping to build the relationship with that office. So we highly recommend that. Another thing you can do, as previously mentioned, you can contact any of us, the government relations staff here at NFU. If there's something noteworthy that came out of your meeting, you can always reach out to us and let us know. We'd love to hear that stuff. But the most important thing to do after your meetings are over is to fill out the gold sheet. And for those of you who have attended previous fly-ins, you probably remember and have filled out one or several of these gold sheets. But the gold sheet, for every congressional meeting you participate in, gold sheet serves as a short survey to recap how that meeting went. More specifically, how receptive that office was to each of our priorities, which is based on the cheat sheet. And so, as you can see on the screen, can we get the next slide up there, Mike? The gold sheet. There we go. Thank you. As you can see on the screen there, the gold sheet asks you to assess that office's general reaction to each of our priorities, whether they were supportive, not supportive, kind of neutral, non-committal. And then it allows you to provide further comments about each section. Anything you believe it would be important for NFU staff to know, we certainly welcome that feedback. These gold sheet submissions, they're really important for us as NFU staff because we will be able to better understand which offices on the Hill are most supportive of our priorities and our policies, as well as the offices that are not so supportive. And they both share a purpose in helping us improve our advocacy efforts going forward and building off the meetings you take during fly-in. One thing to remember is that we only need one gold sheet submission for each meeting by one person on your team. So one meeting, one gold sheet, and you can fill them out by going to the fly-in page on our website and click on the gold sheet link where it will be posted soon. That's coming very shortly. So that's it for they're your gold sheets. And I think we can now quickly transition to the Hill meeting schedules. There we go. So as previously mentioned, we'll be providing you with these schedules. Here's a preview of what your congressional meeting schedule will look like. This is a screen grab of Indiana's schedule from last fly-in. So every state will receive copies of these or some variation of these schedules in your packets. They have all the important information that you'll need. So the date and time of the meeting, the office, where that office is located, and who from that office you'll be meeting with, whether that's with the member of Congress themselves or with their staff. So a couple things here to take note of. First, whoever it says you are meeting with, that is to the best of our knowledge. Things can change very quickly on the Hill. So if it says your meeting is with the representative or the senator, it's possible that a last minute conflict arises and they're not able to make it. It happens. It's unfortunate, but it could happen for any meeting. On the flip side, and the funner one, it's also quite possible that the member unexpectedly drops into the meeting and wants to meet with their constituents or talk about the Farm Bill. That could always happen too. So it's best to be ready for both of those possibilities. Also, most importantly, if for any reason you are running late, we recommend that you just call the office and let them know. They are usually very understanding and will definitely appreciate the heads up. My contact information will also be on each schedule if you run into any issues and need to reach us. So with that, that's it for schedules, and I will now turn it back over to Mike for some further advice and final tips.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks for the updates from, as we call it, the control tower for making all the fly-in meetings happen. So got a lot of pavement to cover, a lot of ground to cover, a lot of meetings to handle, and thanks to the team for making that work. So a few more points as we wrap up here. Can't stress it enough, get some comfortable shoes. Be sure you wear some comfortable shoes. We try to minimize the amount of time you have to go back and forth from the Senate to the House. In fact, you can kind of see on this slide here some of the geography when it comes to where things stand on Capitol Hill. It's a good 2-3 big blocks from the House side to the Senate side. So when you've got a meeting between the two, it takes at least 15 minutes to get there, if not more than that. So be ready for some back and forth potentially. Also on this map off to the right, another 2 or 3 blocks is the NFU office. So we're not that far away, but to go from, say, the House side, the Longworth building, to the NFU building, which we've done it a couple times as staff, it probably takes 20-25 minutes if you're going at a good clip. So a little bit on the further advice on shoes. It may well be hot when you're in town. Probably not 100 like it is today, but it could get up there, so be ready for that and stay hydrated. It can be pretty useful to download some ride-sharing apps. Lyft and Uber work well in the area. There's still some regular cabs driving around Capitol Hill. It's always fun to take people on their first cab rides, too. You can do that. But there's likely to be a lot of people jockeying for cabs because there's probably a few other fly-ins going on while we're here on September 9th, 10th, and 11th. And then any recommendations from any staff or any points from others? I do see a question about identification. You will need your ID possibly to get into USDA. You'll definitely need your name badge to get into USDA that will be issued to you when you get your fly-in folder and materials from your state staffer, either on Sunday night or Sunday or on Monday morning. But keep your ID with you. You shouldn't need your ID to get into any congressional buildings. There was a little while there when you did, due to security, 2021, 2022, but you don't need that anymore. So, but nonetheless, keep your ID with you. There's always a chance you'll end up in a spot that needs more security. And you'll definitely need your ID if you're going to be part of the White House tours. You'll get more information about the White House material to make that happen. For kids, bring the same sort of ID you'd have if they're flying, as I presume most people are to get here, but enough identification that would get you onto a plane. Let's see, other recommendations for advocacy success. One question that came in here also is that, is it best to send a thank you note via email or snail mail? You could do either. Bear in mind that the thank you notes or any physical mail that comes from outside sources to the Hill gets irradiated, goes through a special treatment process and takes a long time to get there, and also gets like practically cooked on the way there. So don't send cookies, for instance. I wouldn't recommend that regardless. But so the thank you note might just take a while. It's probably easier to just send an email. That's my advice, but you could do either. I do see a policy question in there in the hopper here. Masking, we'll get the policy question in a moment here, but on masking, do what makes you feel comfortable. I have seen some folks wearing masks around Washington recently, particularly with the uptick in COVID cases. I wouldn't say it is terribly prevalent right now as far as masking, but do it works for you, and be sure you're comfortable and safe. Question on appropriations. I'm going to phone a friend here for this one. Aaron, where do we stand?
Yeah, happy to take that one. And it's a really good question. My silly answer is the House and Senate don't have to come to consensus on anything necessarily. But I think that there's, I certainly alluded to sort of separate processes for annual appropriations. And I think that's probably why the question has been asked. And I think that we should expect the House and Senate to work out their differences around appropriations. That negotiation probably won't really heat up until the so-called lame duck session of Congress after election season. But conversations and jockeying and positioning, it's all going on. So the asks that we have around that are relevant, and we want to make sure we raise up our preference for those policies. And yeah, we do think they will eventually come to a particular consensus on that, but not for several months yet. Of course, it's not a guarantee, but it's likely that they will.
Should note the term phone a friend is a reference to the early 2000s era game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
The only other thing I'll say on that is we, because they won't figure out annual appropriations until the lame duck session of Congress, of course, our fiscal year 2024, the current appropriations that we're operating under will expire before then. So we do expect them and hope they'll reach a consensus to at least pass a continuing resolution to keep the government funded past the end of September. So that would come even before some of these policy topics that we're focusing on. But we want to hone in on our particular asks, and certainly government funding questions about a potential government shutdown. That's an additional bigger and important topic as well. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Aaron. So with that, I think we are reaching the end of today's webinar. Again, we are super excited to have you coming to Washington in just a few days. We hope you got some information from all this. I do want to ask here, speaking of excited, we've got one more question for you here, a poll question. Let's ready that poll question here. The question is, how excited are you to be part of FlyIn next week? Are you extremely excited or very excited? Take your pick there. So I know, I don't think a panelist can vote here, but we are very excited, and we're extremely excited. Probably even maybe off the charts there, but I just want to see how excited we are. Let's take a look at those results. We are, we're about 50-50. Okay, well, that's reasonable. Let's not be overly excited about it. But all kidding aside, thank you for making time to come on out to Washington to be part of this. Keep watching nfu.org/flyin for more updates on schedule and details. We'll be working with states to make sure all the latest information is available to you, especially as it comes to allocating spots to go to the White House on Wednesday of the fly-in. And if you've got any questions on policy topics, advocacy tips, and what have you, we're here to help out. So thank you again. See you in just over a week, and travel safe. Bye-bye.